Okay, boys, it's time that we start moving over towards the rebels. We have to catch them and get the plans that they stole off us for the Death Star. Are you with me? Yeah, we'll move, but how do we move? And when we get there, how do we shoot? You guys are unbelievable. No wonder you're such bad aim. Hello there, Board Game Maniacs, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Star Wars Legion Rules. This potentially is going to be the last video for the rules. If I miss anything throughout this mini-series that you would like for me to cover, please comment down below and let me know what I've missed, and I'll be more than happy to look it up. And if there's enough to make another full video, I'll certainly do that. But for now, this is probably going to be the last one because we're going to cover moving and shooting. We already did cover basic moving on like open terrain and rough terrain and so on. And you can get that in, you can check out that part into the rules videos for the terrain and cover, I think it's called, the title of it. So check that out for more of the other rules for the movement when you're moving over, like rough terrain, like I said, and so on. But this one's more of just like the basic move and shoot action for Star Wars Legion by Fantasy Flight Games. And you can see that we are going off of this rule set version 1.6.1. It was effective on February 28th of 2020. But I am also going to talk about the new rule set that was released recently, and this is version 1.7. It's effective August 23rd of 2020. So just be aware of that too as well, that we're going to be covering it talking a little bit about the newer rule set, but primarily focusing on the version 1.6.1. So let's get into the movement part, and then we'll get on to the shooting. And again, hiccups like usual. You can see I have a little mock scenario set up here. Again, I'm only using the Imperial for this. I didn't put the Rebels in. We may throw some Rebels into the video as time goes on, but we'll see. But we have a squad of stormtroopers here. We got a squad of speeder bikes that are kind of the lower half of the camera. We got good old Boba Fett, and we have another squad of stormtroopers that are on top of the bunker. Just so everybody knows, this is just a mock setup. And if you want to go over the rules again, that is in the rule book that we talked about for the types of cover and the different types of terrain, like your open terrain, difficult terrain, area terrain, and cover and everything. They are on, just so everybody is aware again, they are on page 8 of the rule book and page 9 because it talks about barricades and that. So everybody is on the same page, right? Because it's very, very important that we all know where I'm getting this information. We've already talked about cards and how to look at the cards and understand that into one of the other videos, but I got the cards up here because it does show you on the card specifically about the movement of how these troopers move or the vehicles move or what have you. Right now I only have Boba Fett and just a stormtrooper just to show you. And if you look down here, the red area, it's got 3 dots, 1, 2, 3. That means that you're going to use, Boba Fett has a movement of 3. And here for stormtroopers, there's 1, 2. So stormtroopers have movement of 2. And you use the movement rulers for that. So that you can see this here is the 2 movement ruler. And the reason why you can tell that it's a 2 movement ruler is because it has 1, 2 onto it. As opposed to like a 1 movement ruler, it has only 1 of the marks on them. And then we have the 3 movement ruler. Let me put that in shot there. Here we go. And it's 1, 2, 3. So as of now, this here is the only movement rulers that you use during the game. Like there's no 4 movement ruler, which is fine. They may come out with it in the future, who knows, but as of now we only have the 3 movement rulers. And on top of that, we also have range tools or range rulers. And you can see one right here, the tip is there, but again, I already went over this, what it is, but you have 4 sections that you go off of for your range, and this is for your movement. So shooting, and to see how close something is when, if it's going to enact a special ability, you're going to use these range rulers. And for movement, you're going to use these movement rulers. So let's go in for a closer look now, and let's talk about stormtrooper movement, because the stormtroopers, as we see, it has 2 movements. So we're going to use the 2 movement ruler, and I'll show you how to move the movement for the stormtroopers. Now, just because we're using stormtroopers, it don't mean that this does not apply for all the other miniatures, because it does, unless it is, again, like a ground vehicle or repulsor vehicle, I think they're called, where they're hovering off the ground like the speeder bikes. But you still use movement rulers to move them. I'll show you the difference as we go on. This is the first example of movement for the stormtroopers, but pretty much troops in general. So again, on the stormtrooper guard, it does tell us that it has 2 red things. So it's a 2 movement range tool, or not range tool, 2 movement tool that you use for this. And on top of this, like sometimes you'll have some special text here, like Boba Fett's card has a jump 2, and like the speeder bikes, they have speeder 1, which is kind of like a compulsory move, but we'll go over that as we go along in this video. But right now we're just talking about the stormtroopers. So as we know, for moving stormtroopers, you always move the commander of the unit, not the commander of the entire squadron, but the commander of that unit. So this here is a unit. So by just moving this over a little bit more, you can see there that the commander is this guy who's pointing. The commander's units always used to have like a dramatic pose like this when it comes to find out who is the commander of each unit. So just be aware, he is the commander. So judging from the rule book, what it does state is that when you are moving, you can move up to the max amount of move onto your character's card for your range. So again, the 2 which is here, so you can move up to the max of 2. You can move shorter if you want. You could go to a range ruler of 1. You can downgrade. Sometimes you have to downgrade 2 as well if you have like difficult terrain or so on and so forth. Or if you just have your basic movement. So I'm just going to show you an example here for moving the stormtroopers, starting with the commander. I'm just going to move these guys out of the way just so that we can have a clear shot of it. So the range rulers have this, or the movement rulers have a loop, and it's really cool. And again, they pivot up to 90 degrees either way you want. So that's the way that they move. So just say I want to move him, the commander, because for movement in a squad, or a unit I should say, you have to move the commander of that squad, and then everyone else in there just consolidates around him. And I'm going to show that right now on camera. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to take this movement ruler, just say I'm going to move him this way. So you butt that up so it is tight against his base. Let me move these guys out of the way so you can see it. So it's tight against his base. Now, since I have it like that, I can say, you know, I'm going to move at a diagonal like that. Or move straight, or again, some way this way. Now, if I wanted to, just hypothetically, I'm going straight ahead for 2. So that's the max that I'm going to be able to move. And this is not like other miniature games. Usually it's front to base to front to base when you're moving for a lot of other tabletop miniature games. But with Star Wars Legion, it's front to the back. So if I want to move the commander all the way to a full movement, I take him because the movement tool is tight against his base. So I pick up the commander and I move him tight, tight to the base right there. So facing of these guys does not make a difference for the troopers. However, for vehicles, it makes a big difference because they have special notches into their bases with arc ranges, so within vicinity. And I'll show you that when we go to the speeder bike for the example. So anyhow, that is a basic full movement for that stormtrooper the commander of that unit. Now, if he wanted to, he can only go half a distance, or not half distance, just a little bit. And then you would hold it, slide it out of the way, and move him there. And just say, okay, yep, that's where I want him to move. Very simple. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about unit coherency for the movement. So I'm going to move these guys back up where they were, just like so. And we're going to change the angle slightly so I can show you how you would move the rest of your miniatures, the troopers, to be in coherency with the commander of that unit. I just moved the commander, so now I want to move the rest of the troops in that unit to move them in cohesion. Now on page 23 of the rule book, they do talk about cohesion. And I'm just going to read the book first off, and we can just go on from there. Actually, it's page 23 and 24. So I'm not going to read it all, but just so everybody knows, each non-leader miniature in a unit must be in cohesion with its unit leader. After a unit leader moves, is deployed to the battlefield, or is displaced on the battlefield, each other miniature in that unit must be placed in cohesion with that unit leader. A mini in the cohesion with its unit leader if the distance between the mini and its unit leader is equal to or less than the length of speed 1 movement tool. So it has to be equal to or less than the movement of the speed 1 movement tool. So pretty much what that means is, so he moved up, and now I want to keep this unit in coherency, and I want to move them further ahead. So I'm going to take my range 1, because it has to be within range 1, and I'm just going to place it right there. Now this guy can go right there, and he's going to be in cohesion with the unit leader. Now, let's do another example here. So the next guy, I'm going to move him. Now, if I placed him here, there's a little gap there. That is illegal. He is not in cohesion with the unit leader because he's past range 1. So the best way to imagine this, and Fantasy Flight Games was genius for this because I played a lot of other tabletop miniature games, and you have to take the measuring tape or the range ruler, and you have to measure every individual one, and it makes for a longer game when you have to do all the movement. But as long as the miniatures are within range 1 cohesion, they're fine. So this guy here, he don't have to move because he's within range 1. You can see there. This guy is actually in range 1. This guy, however, you can see there, there, I'll slide it this way. He is not in cohesion because he is out of range. So to keep them in cohesion, what you could do, just move them up here, just like that. And they would stay in cohesion. And the reason why is because if you take your range ruler 1, your movement ruler 1, and pretend there's a circle, and the outer circle lies right at the edge. So it's circumference the unit leader, which is the center of the circle. And then anybody who's within that circle is in unit coherency, that is within that unit. But if they are outside of that, like so, he'd still be. But if we move them back further, you can see he is out of coherency. So then you wouldn't be able to do that. You would actually have to make sure that he's within, equal to or within range 1 of the measurement ruler. And that applies to any miniature unless special rules apply for keeping unit coherency. Here's another example for the unit coherency. So just say this is difficult terrain. And as we discussed into the cover and terrain video, difficult terrain reduces your movement of your characters down to the next one. So, having said that, unless they have like expert climber or something that does not, that difficult terrain will not affect them. So again, the unit leader is going to move. He originally has a range of 2, but he can't because this is classified as difficult terrain. So he has to get brought down to only a range 1. So after the unit leader has moved to here, then again, you can take these and you can bring them in unit coherency, just like so. Whoop, that guy's falling. And that would work. So that's another example of maintaining unit coherency, but using the rules for difficult terrain. In this example, for movement for the troops, now, just say that this stormtrooper, the leader, is going to move up, and this barricade wasn't there. He wants to move his range of 2. So he's going to move his range of 2, but he is outside of this difficult terrain, just on the edge. But you wanted some of your troopers to move up into this difficult terrain. So because some of your troopers in your unit is going to move up difficult terrain, I gotta stop hitting the miniatures, then you know that these are going to be there. You can't, what you cannot do, and to my understanding, is move him up like this and then start doing like this here for the unit coherency. That would be an illegal move. What you must do, and again, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but this is how I interpreted this out of the rule book. And so you're going to move your unit leader, but I want some of these troopers to go onto this difficult terrain. So because some of your troopers are going on difficult terrain, you still are going to have to reduce your movement of the unit leader down to the next one, to a minimum of 1. You can't go any lower than that. So he'd move up. And then these guys want to go, but because they are keeping unit coherency and going to be on difficult terrain, then there you go. You can do it that way. But again, because some of the troopers want to move up difficult terrain, you're going to have to reduce the unit leader's movement down to the next one from a 2 to a 1. In this example, they are already on difficult terrain and they want to move. So again, you're going to measure from the unit leader, and because they are on difficult terrain, you cannot use the range 2 ruler, because again, as the rule states that on difficult terrain you have to reduce your movement by the next movement tool down to a minimum of 1. You can't go any lower. So then you would have to use the movement of 1 tool, and then kind of, you know, you move them here, and then the rest of these guys too would be, you know, in unit coherency. Now, just say that one of your troopers you want off of the difficult terrain, so you put him off difficult terrain. Does that mean that he's going to change his movement ruler to back to a 2 because one of your troopers is going off? No, because he is on the difficult terrain and he's getting off it, like as in the commander's on the difficult terrain and this unit is getting off. You still have to keep the rule of the 1 speed measurement tool. Another quick note about cohesion is when placing a mini in cohesion, it cannot be placed in base contact with an enemy miniature unless the unit is in melee. So if there was another miniature that, you know, you move into, he's going to be base contact, but you're not in melee, it's illegal. You can't do that for unit cohesion. They have to not be touching base-to-base contact with an enemy miniature. Another key thing to talk about here is if you have any terrain which is impassable terrain, classifying this would be impassable terrain into the game, because you would talk to your opponent and the two will agree on what is hard terrain, hard cover, light cover, impassable terrain, open terrain, rough terrain, you name it. You have to discuss this beforehand to figure it out. But in this case, with these miniatures, where they are moving at a speed of 2, you can see that he is within the speed 2 range right here of this miniature that's on the other side of this impassable terrain. Even a speed 1, he's there. But it would be illegal for him to be there, because when they moved up, don't have line of sight to the leader. He don't have line of sight to the leader of this unit. And also too, as well as when you're placing in coherency, you can't put them over impassable terrain. The only way that you'd be able to do this is by taking this measurement tool of 1, which is here, and place him roughly there, because that would still be in cohesion. This would not. So just take note of that too as well, because that would be an illegal move. On page 22 of the rule book, there's also climb and clamber, which is another part of the movement step. Now, another thing that I forgot to mention is that in Star Wars Legion, you can only do one act. You can do two actions, but they can't be the same. The only action that you can do twice is move, and that is very important to know. But anyhow, for climb and clamber, so on page 22, I'm just going to read this first before we actually show an example. Clambering and climbing are types of movement that allow a unit to move vertically onto or over pieces of elevated terrain. While clambering, a unit must suffer damage. So let's talk about clambering versus climbing. This example of clambering, you have the unit here and they want to get on top of the bunker. Now, a couple of things you have to do. First, measure the height. So you can tell that this is clearly within range 1 of the range ruler. Now you can also do a clamber up to a range 2 height, which I'll talk about in a minute, but right now for the range 1. Now, there's one thing that have to be, or two things that have to be done. Number one is that the unit leader is in base contact with whatever terrain that they are going to climb, or clamber, I should say. Once you determine that the leader is in base contact and you are within range 1 or 2, then you can do which is a clamber. You take one action and you are going to be able to move them up. Now again, they have a range 2, so you take your range 2. You're not going to measure like this. So pretty much anywhere on here is within range 2. So when you do that, then you have to do which is called the unit coherency. Obviously, it's the same thing. So again, by using a range 1 ruler, they have to maintain their unit coherency. Now, hypothetically, or not hypothetically, but if by chance that there was not enough room up here for all of the miniatures in your unit, then you cannot do a clamber or you cannot do a climb because it can't hold them. You can't do that. And that's it. So they're up here, they're on top. Now, for the clamber, what you're going to have to do is find how many miniatures did the clamber. So right here, there's 6. So you're going to take 6 white defense die and you're going to roll them. And for every one that has a shield mark is going to take a wound. Again, so if they do a clamber and you got to roll the 6 dice and you get a shield mark, then they're going to take a wound. When you roll the 6 dice, you're going to see, again, if they have a shield in, they're going to take a wound. And we all know that the stormtrooper units only have 1 wound each, so you might kill some. Now, it does say in the book that you move the unit leader up and then you're going to roll the dice and then you're going to see how many is going to die. I just kind of skipped ahead and went up, but just be aware that when you are making a clamber, you're going to move just the unit leader up, roll the dice, and then whatever ones survive, you're going to move them up to as well and keep them in unit coherency. So I'm just going to roll these dice. So right now, you can see here that I have 2 shield marks. So that means that these two stormtrooper units have died trying to make the clamber move. And that is that for the clamber. Now, if you are doing a clamber on up to a height 2, it's going to be something different. When I say something different, so in this example, instead of them trying to climb up on the bunker, they're trying to climb up on the top of this big tree. Now, with the range ruler, we can see that from the base, range 2 is above this, so they can climb up, or clamber up to a range 2. So same thing is going to apply, but because it is above range 1, but under range 2, you're going to have to do 2 actions to get up there. When I say 2 actions, you take the unit leader first. That would be 1 action at range 1. The second one would be above top. So now what you would do, because it's twice that it took him to get up there by using a clamber move, you still take your 6 dice and you roll them, and there you see I got 2 damage right here. You can see, well, kind of see my hand, my big hand's in the way, but 2 damage. So therefore, 2 of them are going to die so far, but that's only the 1 roll. So now we take the other ones that are left and you roll them. Again, this is for a range 2 or under. So anything above range 1 up to a range 2. So it takes 2 actions. So you'd roll what's left, and I got another shield. But that was it. This here is a surge. Don't make a difference. So therefore, I lost 3 miniatures in this. So then I would take 1 more miniature out. And then we have 2 of them left. So the full 2 actions would be for them to get up there. And again, unit coherency, they have to be within the range 1 of the unit leader. And that is for clamoring. So again, just to reiterate onto this, base contact, it's got to be within range 1 or 2. If it's within range 1, you move, it takes 1 action to go up here, then you roll the white dice, white defense dice equal to the amount of miniatures into the unit. For any shield that you roll, that many miniatures die because they're only 1 wound. If there are multiple wounds, like if a commander went up there, like hypothetically, just someone who had like 4 wounds and they rolled 2, or they got a wound for going up here, then they're going to take a wound onto it. But because these are stormtrooper units, they only have 1 wound available. So I rolled a 3. So again, this was past range 1, but lower than range 2. Because range 1 is right here where my thumb is, and range 2 is off camera. But because of that, it takes 2 actions. 1, you're going to roll. 2, you're going to roll. But for a climb test, it's completely different. And we're going to talk about climbing now instead of clamoring. Another thing to note about this is if a trooper unit leader is in base contact with a piece of vertical terrain without a flat surface or top to place the unit leader onto, such as a fence or a thin wall, it may clamber up and over that terrain, ending its movement on the other side, provided that the terrain height is 1 or lower. So if you want to get onto another side of a wall by doing a clamber, you're going to do the clamber test still, but the thing is you're going to go, it has to be at height 1 or lower. It can't be a height 2 or lower to get to the other side. So again, that is a little different variation to the rules as well. And that was all found on page 22. Climbing is a little different, however. So with climbing, and this is all on page 22, it does state to climb if there is a flat surface or to place the unit leader on at the end of this movement, and the unit can maintain cohesion. A unit can spend 2 actions to safely move vertically up or down a distance up to height 1. At the end of this movement, the unit leader is placed on the flat surface at the top or bottom of the vertical structure as close to the edge as possible. So that is the difference between clamber and climbering. So clambering, you can go up to height 2. Climbing, you can only do up to height 1. Clambering, it takes 1 action, but you got to roll white defense dice, and for every shield that you get onto the white defense is a wound. For climbing, it takes just 2 actions to move up to a terrain that is range 1 or under. Has to be a flat surface. You got to keep unit coherency onto it, and you don't roll any dice. So if you want to safely climb an object, safely get up an object, climb is the one to use, but it uses your 2 actions. If you want to risk it and use the clamber, then you have to roll defense dice. And that is the difference between clamber and climbing. Another thing to note is on a card, I got Boba Fett here, but he don't have the keyword expert climber. But like the Wookiee warriors, they have expert climber into it. And if they do have expert climber, keyword, they do not have to roll any dice and cannot suffer damage because of clambering, because they are expert climbers, they're able to climb. So hypothetically, if we had a Wookiee warrior here and they wanted to get up here, they don't have to roll the white dice because they have expert climber. Now we're going to talk about another keyword that does have specific things for movement. And we have Boba Fett on the screen here, and the reason why, because Boba Fett has jump 2, which is an action. If I show you his card here, we're getting focused right where my thumb is, it says jump 2. And it's very important for that to know if your miniatures have that keyword, because the reason for is where Boba Fett has jump 2, which means that he can do a movement to jump up onto any terrain piece that is has a range or a height of 2 or under. So this here, we already know that this is under range 1. The tree that was in the previous clip is under range 2, so we can even jump onto the tree too as well. And the way you do this, it's very simple. So on Boba Fett's card, his standard movement is a 3, which means he's super, super fast. So if you hold this up, and you're kind of looking from above and to his base, you can see that he can definitely get on here. So because of that, he's going to spend 1 action to do a jump action. So he just jumps up, like so. Don't have to roll any dice. He don't have to count it as 2 actions to do a climb. It is just 1 action to do a jump. Plain and simple. Easy peasy. Couple of things to note about the jump keyword is you can sometimes see the jump X. X stands for the number, so Boba Fett has jump 2. You could have one that has a jump 1, which is can go up to a height of range 1. If you are already on a terrain piece that is a height 1 and you have a jump 1 for your ability, and you want to jump up on another piece of terrain, as long as that other terrain from the base that your miniature is standing on, it fits that prerequisite of a range height of 1, you can do that too as well. So that's a good thing to note. Another thing to note too as well is when you are doing the jump action, it ignores difficult terrain. Because you're not even touching the difficult terrain technically, you're jumping up onto it. You could be on the bottom, touching the base of difficult terrain, and when you jump up and you land onto more difficult terrain, it don't make a difference. Your movement is not going to be reduced because of that. Now, one more thing too as well to talk about for this jump keyword is that if your unit is panicked and you had the jump keyword, you have to use the jump action when you're panicked to get to the closest table edge if there is terrain that is blocking you from you making it to the table edge. So hypothetically, I'll just show you an example here. So just say that Boba Fett had panicked and there's a piece of terrain in front of him and the table edge is on this side here. So Boba Fett with his jump 2, he would have to spend it for part of his panic movement to move over to when he panics to get off the table edge. If that is clear, if it's clear as mud, let me know in the comment section. I'll be able to explain it a little better. I don't know how else to explain it except for the fact that, again, if he panics, Boba Fett, this is just an example for Boba Fett, if he panics, and he obviously would move around this way, if they have a keyword of jump, he has to use that to the movement to get the most expedient way to get to the table edge. As opposed to, like, we have a stormtrooper here, and he panics, but he can't go that way because he's going to hit that, and you don't have the jump keyword. He's going to have to spend his movement to go this way. If he's panicked, a full movement, I should say. So stormtroopers have a speed of 2, so then you would have to go 2 this way to get to the table edge when he panics. And that is it. But Boba Fett, because he has a jump, he would ignore that by just jumping over instead of having to go around longwise. Let's look at an example for moving for a vehicle, specifically this repulsor vehicle, which is the 74Z speeder bike. And you can see here they have a speed of 3. So you know for the max move that they can move is speed 3, unless otherwise that they have a special card to give them more movement or anything. But if you look on the card now, it says Speeder 1. While moving, ignore terrain that is height 1 or lower. When you activate, perform a compulsory move. So they can go over any terrain that is height 1 or lower because they are a repulsor vehicle, which means they are kind of hovering off of the ground. But for this, what I want to talk about specifically is with the Speeder 1, they have a compulsory move, which does not count as one of your actions for your movement. And what that means is with these here speeder bikes, when you activate them, you have to do the first thing you do with with them would be a compulsory move of 3 because they have a max speed of 3, and it's always a max speed that you would move. So you take your commander and just say that he is the commander. So this here thing, it's kind of off camera here. Wait till I try to situate this to get a little bit further so you can see. There we go, that's a little better. So I'm going to activate the speeder bikes. So the first thing I have to do is a compulsory move, which is a speed of 3. So you could change this at any angle you want. I'm just showing an example of 3. So you can see in here, get it in focus, they have notch bases in the front and the back. So to do the move, if he was back here, you're going to have to make sure that this fits into the notch base. You're going to hold it, and he activated, so it's going to be a compulsory move of his max speed, which is 3, so he is going to go down, and he had fitted into the notch base. So that would not count as his first action of a movement. That is a compulsory. That is besides his 2 actions. So once you did that, the same things apply with the unit coherency. So you take a range 1 and just say, okay, I'm going to put him right here. I want him to be there. So he's still within the unit coherency of the range 1 of the leader. So that is completely legal to do. The other example for the movement with the repulsor vehicles, where they do ignore any terrain which is a range 1 or lower. This here stone is obviously within range 1 or lower. So when they do it, they're just ignoring it when they do their move. And the reason why is because they're repulsor vehicles, they are levitating or floating off of the ground, so they can avoid anything that is range 1 or lower. Another example, we're looking at the ATRT right here. He's in base contact with terrain and he wants to do a clamber. So he is a ground vehicle, but he also has what I said before, it's expert climber, expert climber. So what that means is he can do a clamber, which is going to take 1 action to safely get up there. It is under range 1, so he has no problem getting up there. And because of he's an expert climber, where you would have to roll defense dice, you don't have to do that, because when you're an expert climber, it ignores you having to roll the white defense dice to see if you take any wounds. I just wanted to show that for the ATRT for one of the miniatures that has expert climber onto it. Now we're going to talk about shooting, and then after shooting we're going to go into the melee part. And after that, I think we're probably going to be all finished of this whole series for Star Wars Legion by Fantasy Flight Games, obviously. Anyhow, I have a mock setting set up here for shooting. So now, just say hypothetically, it is on the stormtroopers are going to be the first ones that are going to shoot. I'm just grabbing the tokens for them. Actually, I'll be back in a second to get the tokens just to show. During the gameplay, it is on to the stormtroopers for their activation, and they want to shoot at to the rebels that are in here. So we have their activation token, we place them in front of them, and then we're going to look at their card to figure out what they can do. So if we bring the card up here, it does say unarmed, they have a black die, but they are not in melee, they're at a different distance to shoot. So they're going to shoot with their E11 blaster rifle. Now they have a range of 1 to 3, and each of them use white dice. And on the card, if they roll a surge, it equals another hit. And in this example, there's nothing impeding, there's no terrain, no hardcover, no nothing that is in front of them blocking. So this is going to be just a simple, very straight shooting process. Because the stormtroopers are shooting, you have to look at the unit that you have there. So in this unit, it's kind of the distance, but I'll explain it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, which has the basic E11 blaster rifle. But we have one, which is right here, that is added to the unit, and he has the DLT 1919 gun. So if we look at this card, because this is the upgrade card, it says Stormtroopers only, add 1 DLT-9 Super Mini, impact 1. While attacking a unit that has armor, change up the 1 hit result to a crit result. But we don't have to worry about that because the unit of rebels that they're shooting at does not have any armor. But what we're looking at here is right here it says range 1 to 4 and it's 2 red dice. So the E11 blaster rifles have a range of 1 to 3 while the DLT-19 has a range of 1 to 4. So it has a longer range. In this circumstance, it don't really make much of a difference because we're going to take a range ruler here and we measure it from the base to see if we can peg them. So we can certainly peg them. As long as you can hit 1 in the unit, you're going to be able to start shooting, open fire, and take a crack at them. If we look on page 16 of the rule book, the heading attack, it explains roughly what you do there. So first thing you got to do, it says, is declare a defender. So we already did that. The stormtroopers are shooting into the rebels right here. So after you declare the defender, you got to form the attack pool. So the attack pool is how many dice you're going to use, and determine eligible minis after you form the attack pool. So the attack pool again would be this amount of white dice for the 5 miniatures that have the E11 blaster, and the DLT-19 has 2. So there's your attack pool for that. Now you're going to have to go from your unit leader, from the attacker, to a miniature, the closest miniature into the defender. So the unit leader here is right here. So we are going to go with the range ruler by placing it on base, and you can see he definitely has range on every one of them. So he's going to be able, this unit is going to be able to shoot their entire amount of weapons at that unit of rebels. And again, it could be a little different. I'll explain different scenarios as we go along with this shooting, but this is first off just your basic shoot with nothing interfering and everything is in range and it's worthwhile to shoot. After you form the attack pool and you determine the eligible minis, I'll just read the eligible minis. It's section 2, part A on page 16. Determine eligible minis. Each mini in the attacker is eligible to contribute to the attack pool if that mini has line of sight to any mini in the defender. So again, I already showed that. So part B of part 2, choose a weapon. The attacker can choose 1 weapon from each eligible mini to contribute to the attack pool. To choose a weapon, the attacker must meet all requirements indicated by the weapon's keywords, and that weapon's range must include the range of the attack, as determined from the attacker's unit leader to the closest mini in the defender. We already measured, we've shown that we can see them. They're in range from the stormtrooper unit leader, so it's all eligible. There's nothing that is going to stop us from shooting. There's no terrain that is giving it hard cover or soft cover or anything involved into that. So after that is done, you're going to gather the dice. For each eligible mini that chose a weapon, the attacker gathers the numbers and type of dice depicted on the weapon and places them on the battlefield near the defender. That you can see right there. Declare additional defender. If there are any weapons remaining that have not been added to the attack pool, the player may repeat steps 1 and 2, forming a separate attack pool with the new weapons. And it keeps going on and on about that. Again, it's on page 16. So, they don't have any dodges that they have onto them. They don't have a ready token or anything. Again, this is just the first example of a basic shoot. So now what we do is we gather them all together because all of them are shooting at that same unit right there. So then you're going to roll it and you're going to count them out. So that's a hit, that's a hit, that is a crit hit, that's another crit hit. Now we have this token here, you can see, which is a surge. And remember we looked at the stormtrooper card, and on the stormtrooper card for the attack bonus of the stormtrooper, you can see right there, if you roll a surge on the die, it counts as an extra hit. So therefore, this surge would turn to another hit. So these are gone, these are canceled out. On another note with this, just say that it was the beginning of the stormtrooper's activation, And what they decided to do is for the first action, they are going to aim. I'm just opening up to get the aim token here. So I'm going to grab an aim token. So the stormtroopers, it's their first item. Okay, we are going to aim. So this would had been put down for the first action before they shot. So if they had the aim token and they shot, so you see there, they have these hits and 2 blanks. So they can spend this aim token to roll up to 2 dice. So there, they rolled again and they got another hit because they got a surge. So therefore, there's 3 and 3, that's 6 hits that are going into that rebel unit. So now, just to show you a little bit of stuff here, just say they were shooting and there was a blockade of terrain in front of them. They still have line of sight onto them, but when you were talking to your opponent and determined that these were hard cover, so they're shooting over hard cover at this unit of rebels. So therefore, hard cover will cancel out any hit or 2 hit results, up to 2 hit results. Crits, they cannot, excuse me, hiccup again. Jeez, here goes. Crits, they cannot cancel out the crit. So this crit that I rolled, where they had hard cover, then you would take out 2 hits. So the 2 hits, bring it a little bit closer, you can see there, that's the hits. They couldn't do a hit and a crit because hard cover, or light cover, cover does not cancel out any crit results, it's only hits. So 2 hits will be canceled because they're shooting over the cover. So therefore, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 hits, or 3 hits and a crit left that they're going to be able to go at to take damage onto them. So because they were successful and they are able to hit them, then this unit would get a suppression token because they're going to get hit regardless. But now this unit of rebels are going to defend. And if we look on the rebels defense card, or the rebels card right here, this white die that's in the middle, that's what they defend with. So the amount of hits that is going against them, that is the amount of white defense dice that they're going to roll to try and block that. So we have 4 hits going through. So therefore, you got, whoops, you have 4 defense dice that you're going to roll because they're 4 hits. So we're going to roll the defense dice. And if we look onto the Rebels card, they have a defense bonus. When you roll a surge, it counts as a shield. So because of that, they did roll 1 block and 1 surge. So that surge is going to cancel or going to transfer over to a block. So therefore, they defended 2 against the 4 hits. So you take 2 of the hits, which is right there, and what's left is 2 points of damage. And we all know that the rebels only have 1 wound each, so therefore the rebel player would say, okay, I'm going to take out this guy and this guy because you killed them. And they have the suppression token onto them. Pretty simple for shooting and defense. Now, this is going to be another example I want to show you now. Hypothetically say that these barricades were not there when they shot and they already had a suppression token on them from a previous shot that somebody has taken at them. So when they shoot, the stormtroopers shoot, and just say that they only got 2 successful hits this time onto the rebels. Now, when you have a suppression token, it counts as light cover. So automatically, one of these hits are going to be canceled because they have a suppression, which means that it cancels out 1 hit because they're considered to have light cover. Here's another example for defense while in the shooting steps. So on page 38 it does explain about dodge. You can see the 2 tokens, green and white tokens that are in front of the rebel unit. They have 2 dodge tokens on them from a previous thing. So at the end of each round though, if they have any aim tokens or dodge tokens, they are gone. So this is during the same round. They already had their dodge tokens onto them because of cards and so on. They took an action for a dodge, so on and so forth. So just say that the stormtroopers have shot, no cover or anything, it don't matter, and the only eligible is they got 2 hits onto them. So with them 2 hits, then what can happen is the rebel player could spend the 2 dodge tokens to cancel them out, which means they're not going to have any hits. Now, however, another example would be if they had a hit going towards them and a crit going towards them, they can spend 1 dodge token to cancel out the hit, but dodge tokens will never cancel out the crit results. The crit results are the only way you can get rid of the crit results that I'm aware of is by when you roll your defense dice and you roll a shield on your defense, that would cancel it out. But a dodge token cannot cancel out a crit result. Another little simple example for the shooting is, just say for instance, the stormtrooper or the rebel trooper went, they moved, and then for their second action they did, which is called a ready, or standby I should say. You can see that token there. Get it in focus, is for standby. And what that allows them is, if they didn't attack the round where, just say they attacked and then they wanted to do standby, they couldn't do that because they performed an attack. But if they moved and did a standby, that is legal, you're allowed to do that. And after this unit, just say they shot, and during the shoot they actually killed 2 of the miniatures on the rebel side. Because they have a readiness token, they are able to do either a free move action or a free action. Like, they can either move or they can shoot or what have you. So because they shot already and they only moved and then they did a readiness, it's kind of like Overwatch, I guess, if you play like 40K. So you could remove this because you were on standby and then you were going to shoot back at that unit as a free shoot action. And again, this is an exception to the rule because if you shot during your turn, you can't shoot again for your second action. And it applies to this too as well, because they moved and then they put a ready or standby, then they're able to shoot. So after they perform all their stuff, they're going to be able, and the only stipulation is they have to be within range 1 or 2 of the miniature. And you can see they're definitely just past, no, they are actually at range 1. So there's they're just past range 1, like I said, because you measure from the unit leader. So because of that, they're able to do a retaliation, and it's not called retaliation, it's called, they're ready and they're going to shoot, or standby, so they're going to shoot again. So you look at their card and they would have black die. So there'd be 3 black dice, and then with that guy's card, you have the extra dice for that, and I think it's 6 white dice if I'm not mistaken, or that might be for the troopers. These guys, they would have, I'm just trying to find their card because I didn't pull it out before. Oh, there we go. It's 6 white dice. That's right, and they got a range of 1 to 3, so therefore they would all be able to shoot. So you have 3 white, and then plus an extra, 3 black dice, and then 6 white dice that would be going into the stormtroopers, because they had the standby token that they spent. They didn't attack, they only moved this round, and then they did the standby action. So again, that's another part of the shooting process. You would roll, defense, and so forth, like I showed you in the previous clip. Here's another example of shooting. Now, again, this is taken from page 17, and it's under the heading of attack pool. There's a couple of stipulations and things you have to go by for this. So these stormtroopers are going to shoot at this group of rebels as well as what's left over from this group of rebels. And they're going to shoot, it's all in the same action, a shoot action. The same shoot action for that instance. And how that can be done is, you look at this and we have 5 with E11 blasters, and then the other stormtrooper has DLT 19. So because of that, what we could do is take the 5 white dice that we're going to roll that with the 11 blasters, and they're going to shoot at those rebels, and then the E11 is within range, of the other group, he's going to shoot at those. And that way you can separate when you're going to shoot if you have different weapons into your unit. Now, if for instance, it wasn't this guy was gone, and then you just had all these E11 blasters that are shooting, they can't separate the shot like you could with the DLT-19. And the reason why is because all of the attack pool that is using the same weapon has to attack the same target. They can't deviate. But because the DTL-19 was a different weapon, they could deviate and put those into that group there. And that is an exception for the shooting, so you should be aware of that. Again, this is all explained under attack pool on page 17 of the rule book. And then you would just roll accordingly and roll for your defense and so on and so on. Using the same angle, camera angle for this, here's another example of shooting. So we have this group and they are shooting at the rebels. The stormtroopers are shooting at the rebels like usual. And you are measuring from this trooper, the unit leader, and he definitely can see to shoot. But the exception here is these two guys in the back, they have range 1 to 3, and they unfortunately, well, they would be in range 2 as well. Sorry, I should have measured this. So just say that this group, I don't have it zoomed out enough, but hypothetically, they were here, and these were just outside range 3. They still stayed in unit coherency, so I'm just going to move these back. Hopefully they're still on camera there. But two guys that are in the back that are kind of off camera slightly, they do not have range to hit at them. So what you would do in that case is you would count up the amount of miniatures that do have range to the opposing team. So just say, hypothetically, these two are the only ones that had range to shooting at these. So then, simply, you would take the attack dice for the stormtroopers that can do it at range 1 to 3, which there's only 2 that have range 1 to 3 onto them, so you'd only be able to roll 2 dice, as opposed to all of them into the group, because these 3 back here is past range 3, so them weapons will not reach them. It's only these 2 out of the group will be able to reach. So then you would roll these like usual, apply the hits, and if they have any hits or if they're blank, they wouldn't get a suppression because they didn't even touch them. But just say they hit 1 with the crit, so therefore they're going to get a suppression token, and they would only have to defend against 1 hit, so that they would roll. They got a blank, so then 1 would die from that unit. And again, that is if all of your unit don't have the proper range to shoot at the opposing team's unit, but only have like 1 or 2 that is within the range 1 to 3 of the weapon. So that's another example for shooting. In this example, you have the stormtroopers again. They're shooting at this group of rebels. You can see one of them is behind this wall here because of movement. They were placed there. So they're going to do their shooting as normal, and just say when they shot, they actually scored not 1, not 2, but 3 hits. And after the defense was rolled, they failed, so 3 of them are going to die into the rebel unit. Now this guy is out of sight, but the one that is in sight here is the unit leader. So in this case, what you would do, because the unit leader, you always are going to assign another miniature. If unit leader dies, you're going to assign another miniature in the unit to be unit leader. So in this case, if 3 of them were going to die, you would take the 3 of these off, but the unit leader needs to be the last one left, because that is always the last one left. So then you would pretty much just take this one out and exchange it, because he got nominated for unit leader, so you know which one is the unit leader, and it's the only one left is going to be here because he was hiding, didn't have line of sight to shoot him. So that is, you would exchange it so that there's always a unit leader into your group for your miniatures. One thing to know too as well about shooting is some weapons will have keywords onto them, like Pierce 1, or it could have another thing, Impact 1, and so on. I'm not going to go over all the keywords because there is a lot of keywords to go through in Star Wars Legion. But in the rulebook, if you're ever unsure about keywords or one thing or another, or for the attack or shooting or melee or what have you, on page 86 of the rulebook is the index. So then anything you're looking at, you just have to look it up. It'll tell you what page number it's on, and then turn to that page number and read the rules reference for that. So again, it's very important to know where the index is for the rule book, because it can save a lot of time instead of trying to sift through a large rule book to find something specific. Next, we're going to talk about melee. So on page 52 and page 53, it does talk about the melee thing. I'm going to read this first before we go through the explanation on camera. And pretty much it states, if two trooper units are in melee, those units are engaged. Any unit type that can be in melee, but only troopers can be engaged. So engaged means that if you are base to base with another trooper unit, you are considered engaged. But if a trooper unit is in base contact with a vehicle, the vehicle is not considered engaged. It's still in melee, but it's not engaged. I'll explain more as we go along as we read through this on page 52. It also continues, when a unit performs an attack against a unit that is in melee with, that attack is a melee attack. Melee attacks follow the same rules as range attacks with the following exceptions. The attacker can use only weapons that have the melee icon. I'm stopping reading the book from there because you can see the unit leader is within range 2 of any one of the units, and his movement is 2, so therefore he can go in to do a melee attack and engage them. So this unit leader will move up like so. It don't have to move up to the other unit leader. It could move up to just another miniature in the unit, but in this example I'm just showing you that. So once that is done, you are going to apply the same rules of unit coherency. So again, you could move this one here because he's still in unit coherency. Move that one there. It's in unit coherency. So just say we move the DLT with the DLT with this. Whoa, I'm wrecking it. Like so. And he can move there because it is unit coherency still. And like so. So they're all in unit coherency. And now that means that every one of the units are tied up. Every one of the miniatures units tied up with another miniature. In this example, I should say. If you look at the Stormtroopers unit card, this is unarmed. This is the melee symbol. So if they have a weapon for melee, it would state here. But these Stormtroopers, they don't have melee weapons. They're unarmed. So they're going to use black dye for each miniature into the unit. As opposed to other weapons, other cards, I should say, like Boba Fett. If we look at it here, this is the melee symbol, but he has boot spikes for the weapon. So he gets to attack with 2 red dice. As opposed to, like I said, the Stormtroopers here would only be able to attack with 1 black die each. Continue on with the reading now. The target of the attack must be in the same melee as the attacker. And you can see in that example right there. If a unit has melee weapons, it can start a melee by moving into base contact with any miniatures. To start a melee, a player must follow these steps in order. Move the unit leader, which we did. The player performs a move moving their unit leader into base contact with the enemy miniature. Move other minis. Maintaining cohesion, the players place each other mini in the unit that started the melee in base contact with enemy minis that belong to the same enemy unit that their unit leader is now in melee with, which I showed you, and you can see it's already done here. Opponent moves minis. Maintaining cohesion, the player's opponent moves any of their own minis that belong to the unit that is now in melee combat that are not already in base contact with the enemy mini into base contact with minis from the unit that started the melee. So pretty much, simply put, so they moved in, and just say these enemies were kind of like a little bit more of a distance. So then the opposing player in this case would be the stormtroopers, they would move in base contact. Like so. And so that explains that part. It kind of sounds a little cloudy, but this is kind of simplifying it a bit of what I understand. And if I'm wrong, comment down below. Timestamp the video for this and refer to the page number of this rule book and give your brief explanation of what I did wrong for this, because it's very important. And then we're going to continue on reading now. Opponent moves minis. Okay, so if the opponent's unit does not have a melee weapon, the opponent does not move their minis into base contact with the unit that started the melee. So you can only be in melee with that unit if you have a melee weapon. A unit cannot move in such a way that its minis would be placed in base contact with multiple enemy units. Continuing on. It is possible for a unit to be in a melee with multiple enemy units if another unit joins afterwards. Joins later. So another unit can certainly join melee after melee, because once you are engaged with trooper units, you are engaged, and there are penalties if you leave the engagement at any point, which we'll cover shortly down this video track road that we're going. I'm stumbling forward because I'm reading as I'm talking. Gotta stop doing that. A unit that does not have a melee weapon cannot start a melee. There you go. So if you want to do melee and you don't have a melee weapon, you can't start a melee combat. Plain and simple. When moving minis into base contact with enemy minis after a melee has been started, if there is not space to place a mini in base contact with an enemy mini in the same melee, that mini must still be placed in cohesion. And on the bottom of page 52, for advanced melee rules, it gives a nice little diagram. I'm not going to show you and go over it. You can just look at that and find out all about that. Minis that are not in base contact with enemy minis can still contribute to the melee attack if the unit to which that minis belong to in the melee. So if you can't get all your miniatures in base contact, but they're in that same unit that is in melee, they can still contribute to it. They don't have to be all base to base contact. But in this example, I just wanted to make it simplified where they are all in base to base contact. Continuing on. Whenever there are minis that are not in base contact, okay, I already said that. If both players own minis that are not in base contact with an enemy mini and should be, the player that is currently activating a unit or has most recently activated the unit, even if that unit is not the unit with minis that should be placed in base contact with enemy minis, should move their minis into base contact with enemy minis before the other player does so. If neither play has activated a unit yet this round, the blue player should move their minis first. So again, you have your red player and blue player, and if neither one of them have done it, then the blue player will do it first. They have, what's the word I'm looking for? Precedent, not precedence. They have the ability to move in first because they're blue player. The words are just not working in my brain at the moment. Anyhow, continue on. Again, this is on page 53 now. So I went from page 52 to 53. Minis that are no longer in base contact should always be placed back into base contact with an enemy mini if able. Even if each enemy mini that was in base contact has just been defeated. This can happen when the defending unit does not have a melee weapon and not all defending minis were in base contact with the enemy mini. Really good for this. And finally, if for any reason minis cannot be placed back into base contact with an enemy mini, or none of the minis belonging to that unit are in base contact with an enemy mini, those minis stay where they are on the battlefield and that unit is no longer in melee. Again, I think that's a really important thing to note here about the last part of that statement of it being that they're going to be no longer in melee. And again, this is on page 53. So let's simulate a melee attack for this right now. Same camera angle. Stormtroopers are going to initiate melee with the rebel troopers. And ignore where I did where the rebel troopers moved in we're just going to say that the stormtroopers in this example had moved in. So we look at the stormtrooper card as before, and you have the E11 blasters, which are arranged because it got 1 to 3, and then you have the melee symbol there, so they have a black die. So then you look at how many are into the unit. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. All of them are touching bases of other minis, so we're going to have 6 black attack dice for this. So I'm just grabbing the dice here because I'm not prepared, which is silly. So I got my 6 attack dice. You can see right there. And I'm going to roll them. And it's off camera, obviously, that I roll. I'm just going to zoom out here a bit. But you can see this is pretty bad. I got a surge and I got a hit. And on the stormtrooper card, we can see that they have the surge bonus is a hit. So that surge would actually turn into a hit. So that's going to be 2 hits that are going into the rebels. So then the rebels will do their defense just like if it was in a range attack, and the rebels have white defense dice. So it's 2 white defense die that they would roll, and you can see that they failed. So therefore 2 of the miniatures would die. Boo boo, just like that. They are gone out, the rebels, and that is part of the melee step for it. I had to stop the camera there for a second because I had to sneeze anyhow. So they took them out. So we have 2 minis that have melee weapons and they're not in base contact. So I'm just moving them so that they can be in base contact. Just like so. So now the melee, you know, like they did 1 action, which is the attack. They can't do 2 melee actions in the same round. But the first action, again, would have been that the stormtroopers have moved in to get in melee with the rebels. So first action was moving, then they attacked, and we did this. Everything else is done for that. So now, after melee is all done, just now, hypothetically, you could say, then another stormtrooper unit that was within range of 2, it's their activation. On one of their activations, they decided they're going to move in to help attack. So then you're going to move the stormtroopers so that they can be in base contact. Again, this is all following the melee rules. So they can all fit in here. So just like so, but they have to keep unit coherency. Now, unit coherency would be here, but they can't be in base contact with that. But then you would perform your melee attack for the stormtroopers and then the defense for the rebels too as well. So everything is the same. But now we're going to talk about can you attack, can a unit be range and attack a unit that is in melee, or also if they're engaged to disengage or to leave the combat. We're going to talk about that one now because that's important, and it probably will come up during the games. You can see in this example we have another unit that is not within melee and they want to shoot, but all the units are engaged, so therefore they really cannot shoot into an engaged melee unit. And on top of that, let's talk about, I couldn't remember the key word, but it's called withdraw. So just say, for instance, these white stormtroopers want to withdraw from being engaged in melee. Now there's a couple of things that happens for withdrawing, and into the updated rule book, the version 7.1, I think I said, and I'll tell you which one. Yeah, version 1.7, I said it backwards. The one that's August 23rd, 2020, on page 82, it does talk about withdraw. And I'm just going to read this, and then we'll just show it as an example on camera after we read it on camera. So if a trooper unit is engaged, it can leave that melee by withdrawing during its activation. To withdraw a unit must use its entire activation and spend all of its available actions to perform a single speed 1 move. A unit that is withdrawing cannot perform any other actions, including free actions, and cannot use any of its own abilities or keywords while withdrawing. A unit is not required to have 2 available actions to withdraw. A suppressed trooper unit, which means if you're suppressed, you only have 1 action, not the 2. Or an ionized droid trooper unit can still use its 1 available action to withdraw. So if you were suppressed and you only had 1 action, you could still withdraw, but you can't do anything else because you are suppressed. But even if you're not suppressed and you want to withdraw, it's going to be a 1 movement, and that's all you can do for your turn. And again, this is all on page 82 of the newer rulebook that came out in August. A withdraw is considered a move action. A unit with no available actions cannot withdraw. So if they're activated and you don't have any actions, you can't withdraw them. You have to stay into the melee. And melee can be pretty bad. A unit cannot withdraw in such a way that it moves back into melee with a unit it is withdrawing from. So before we go on any further, just so that I can kind of explain that, so these white stormtroopers want to withdraw from the melee because they have another unit here. They're deciding they're going to start coming after that. So they would spend their two actions to do withdraw. So again, keeping with unit coherency, the stormtrooper unit leader, I'm just going to move the camera over a bit here so that we can see it more clearly. He's going to withdraw like so, and then with unit coherency, all of the other stormtroopers are going to have to withdraw too as well and stay within the unit coherency, as you can see, with the unit leader. However, a unit with a maximum speed of 0 cannot withdraw. So if they have a max speed of 0, I don't know what unit would have that, but it does say that in the rulebook that they're not going to be able to withdraw. A panic unit must withdraw, moving towards the closest edge of the battlefield. So if that unit is in melee, it becomes panicked. It has to move out of melee. It has to withdraw and move to the closest table edge at their maximum speed. When a creature trooper or emplacement troopers withdraw, it can perform free actions and use abilities. It must still spend all available actions and perform a speed 1 move. So if them stormtroopers were an emplacement trooper or a creature unit or what have you, and they would spend all their actions to withdraw, but if they had anything else that when you move, like the snowtroopers, they move to get a free range attack. So if they were snowtroopers and they withdraw, their 2 actions is to move out, but on the card it does say that they have a free range attack, then they would be able to shoot at that other unit that they planned on. So that is the exception there for the melee. There you have it, Board Game Maniacs. That is melee in a nutshell. If I've missed anything that is important to melee, please timestamp the video, refer to the page number in what version of the rule book. Again, I am going off of the February rule book and combining it with the newer one, which is the August one, so version 1.6 and 1.7, I think what it is. It's in the beginning of the video anyhow. So if I make anything, just any mistakes, timestamp the video, refer to the page number, give an explanation of what I got wrong, because this way, everybody who is wanting either to learn to play Star Wars Legion, thinking about purchasing it, or is playing it and not sure about certain rules, they can refer to the videos and also refer to the comments that everybody makes. And again, if rules mistakes are done, it's very important to timestamp it and refer to a page number in the rulebook. Because if you just say, you did this wrong at the interval 21 minutes and 30 seconds in, well, you should have done that. I don't know if I should have done that. You didn't refer to a page number so that I can collaborate or find out that, you know, you're correct by looking at the rule book and find that out. So again, remember, refer to a page number and timestamp the video. That is the only way that people are going to learn in this such great community that we have for gaming, for Star Wars Legion and other games. Whew, all right. So again, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you didn't already, and I would love to hear your input on all of the videos that we did for this month for Star Wars Legion rules for the theme month. And it's in November. So the next, I'm not even going to tell you what the next theme is for December. You are going to have to, well, you don't have to, or you could just wait and watch whatever videos are going to be released, or you can become an official sponsor of Board Game Maniacs by going over to a Patreon account. And if you sign up and be an official sponsor, you do get some benefits, such as you're going to know in advance what is coming out the month after for it, and so on. There's 3 different tier levels. It's all explained, so the link is in the description below for our Patreon account. Go check it out. It'll give you all the information. So I hope you enjoy this. And again, if I missed anything, just comment below, refer to a page number, timestamp the video, and so on for any of the videos, not just Star Wars Legion, but just in general, because that is how we all get better playing the games, from learning from each other and more experienced players. Woo! All right, so until then, Board Game Maniacs, play some games, play some Star Wars Legion, shoot some stormtroopers or shoot some rebels. It's your call. It's whatever faction you want to play. But most importantly of all, and that is, be a maniac. I'll see you next time. Bye! Bye! Hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to keep up to date with Board Game Maniacs, click on the like and subscribe button to be notified when more videos come available. If you want to become an official sponsor of Board Game Maniacs, go to patreon.com/BoardGameManiacs. Or you can go to streamlabs.com/BoardGameManiacs1. That's right, and you can donate to help keep the lights on, keep food in our bellies, and play more games. We'll purchase more games, more equipment to make Board Game Maniacs evolve and get bigger and larger. Because of you, the viewers, I thank you from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head for all of your support. And until next time, Board Game Maniacs, be a maniac.